So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to ABOR 1420, Communicating with Aboriginal Peoples Across Genres. This week, we'll be doing modules 1 to 3 in terms of your lectures, the resources that you'll be looking at, and we'd encourage you to make your posts for this week as well, although that's a little bit more flexible. I'd like to start our course with an acknowledgement of country. So an acknowledgement of country has come to be one of the key ways, for instance, that organisations or events can indicate that they are being respectful of Aboriginal protocols and Aboriginal peoples. So there's a whole range of ways which this can be done. There's one example on the screen for you from New South Wales Government, but another way that I'd like to do it is to say Gingagali, Jingi Walla with a Bayan, hello and how are you? Now, we're really excited that you're joining us in this course. We pay our respects to the land that we're on, which is the Wabakal land, and any of the lands that you're accessing the course from. We also pay our respects to elders past and present, and we extend that to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, who might be in the course with us. Okay, so this week, really basic. We're just going to be looking at some of the themes and what you're going to learn, and I'll be providing you with some snapshots of course content and examples, so that you can start to get a feel for the kind of thing that we'll be talking about. So during the course, we're going to be looking at culturally traditional and contemporary perspectives. We're going to look at different styles and practices across a whole range of domains. One of our key terms will be the idea of representation, but also the challenges that Indigenous peoples face and negotiate in terms of Western knowledge systems and contemporary life. So we've got a little bit of a diagram here, and it talks about us trying to learn how to be culturally capable. And in doing that, there's 3 different elements. We need to be able to work across what do we know, what are we, our being, and what do we actually do, which is our practice. So a lot of what we'll do in the course, will be about the knowing. But when you're doing those assessment items and reflection, you're starting to think about being and doing. Okay, so including this in your own practices. Okay, so you're going to be exploring, what it looks like to have miscommunication. You're going to think about different genres and contexts. Okay, and then there's a whole range of areas that you might be interacting with. So that could be things like an art gallery. It could be things like Aboriginal media, so audiovisual media like Karma, or historical print media like the Dawn magazine. Some of those stereotypical kind of representations, like the work of Eric Jolliffe, which was incredibly popular, particularly in a rural context. Okay, so one of the things that we really need to understand, that we'd hope that everyone comes out of the course with, is an understanding that the dreaming, continues to underpin Aboriginal life for many people. And, it tells us about the development of the world, about behaviour and relationships. And it's a mistake to see this as only being in the past. It's also something that's in the present, and we assume will be in the future as well. So, when we think about what is contemporary communication, we're going to look at how Aboriginal peoples have been able to adapt and change over time, and to then see the different modes of communication that can be used to still contribute to the continuity of Aboriginal cultural strength and traditions. Okay, so we can look at things like performance. What does it mean when we have music and dance and song and cultural knowledge? Excuse me, and how are they interconnected? So you might get an art piece, for instance, but that art piece needs to be, quote, danced into life. So we need to understand how this preserves history, language, identity, and culture. We'll also be looking at things like short films and documentaries, because again, we've all been in, say a classroom in school where the topic is Aboriginal focused. And, so rather than teach, the teacher will put up, a film or a documentary for us to watch and then have a discussion afterwards. A really strong example is a series called The First Australians, and you can hyperlink to that. It is mainly shot, directed, and produced by Aboriginal people. And so in that sense, and this will be part of what we'll explore in the course, it gives a bit of a different perspective. We'll also be looking at feature film. So we know, for instance, that the first colour film that was ever shot in Australia was the film Jeddah, which was about a young Aboriginal girl, and set in the Northern Territory. So if you can imagine people who are only used to black and white film suddenly seeing these very blue skies and the orange rocks, and, it was, billed as this kind of cinematic marvel. Okay, so there's a 2013 film, that we'll use as an example, which is Charlie's Country. And that was directed by Rolf de Heer. And part of the reason why he did that was, to provide a vehicle for his friend David Golpalil to be able to express, his art. And what we'll also do is, look at, another really quite contemporary film, so from only 2 years ago, which is called Sweet Country. And I think that, we've kind of become used to now the Aboriginal focused films. They tend to be focused on the Northern Territory, but that's not always the case. So we'll look at a range of examples. We're also going to look at Aboriginal art and look at some of the real sort of controversies about that. What makes Aboriginal art? What about knockoff Aboriginal art? And given some of the discussion that is going on in the media at the moment, we'll also look at things like copyright. So who owns the Aboriginal flag? And should people have to pay to reproduce the flag on items? We're also going to look at languages. So this is the International Year for the World's Indigenous Languages. So there's a whole range of online resources that we can point you to as we go through the course. And, these will be able to support you if this is something that you find particularly interesting, and something that you might want to pursue in a later course with us, for instance. Okay, so in Module 9, we're going to look at written communication. So how Aboriginal peoples contributed to early colonial writings, but then how that written medium has been used to raise awareness about contemporary political issues. And then some examples of Indigenous poets and also Aboriginal autobiography. Okay. So then in Module 10, we're going to look at the media. So we know that media bias, really reinforces some very ugly stereotypes about Aboriginal people. But we're also going to look at some really positive examples of how this can be used for recording and distributing cultural knowledge or celebrations about Aboriginal the Aboriginal experience. And then we'll return again, and this links, I think, very strongly particularly to ideas about Aboriginal art. We'll return in Module 11 to look at Indigenous cultural, intellectual and property rights. And just consider some of the broader issues about who owns, different ways of thinking and being and doing, or can you own that, in fact? So hopefully, this little module is just giving you a brief understanding of, what the online course is going to look like. We'd really encourage you, to email us, give us a call, arrange for meetings if you need those. Trish, Tracy and I wish you the very best of luck for your studies, and we look forward to working with you over the next couple of weeks.